Okay, good morning, everybody. We're back on our tefillah. We had a couple of breaks. We had Shavuot. We had we spoke about the prayer for the state of Israel. We had like a couple of interesting stuff in honor of special occasions. Okay, we're back on track on our stuff. So we actually concluded the Arvit for Shabbat last time, but maybe we should just kind of just refresh our mind. Just the last unit of the Mariv for Shabbat, for Friday night. The last unit is what happens after the Amidah. Okay, so we're in the middle of page 346. We're today using the Black Art Scroll Sidurim. So we said that immediately after the Amidah, so as we know, the Mariv said it several times for various reasons, started with the status of the Amidah to start with, since it's not obligatory on the same level as the Shacharit Mincha, because the Korbanot are not parallel. Okay, so because of that, there's no repetition of the Amidah ever in Arvit. However, on Friday night, we have some sort of a difference here. So immediately after the Amidah, the entire congregation will recite together those famous psukim from the story of Genesis, of creation. When we talk about Shabbat, God rested on the seventh day. And what's interesting is that those verses are smack in the middle of the Amidah. We just recite them during our silent Amidah. Right after the opening, if you go back to page 340, you see we have the opening for the central bracha of the Amidah, the middle bracha, Kedushat Hayom, holiness of the day. And so the opening itself is Ata Kedash et Yom HaShvi L'Shmecha, you sanctify the seventh day for your namesake. As we said, the theme of that part, and generally speaking of Friday night, is creation, right? It's a Shabbat of creation. And therefore, the psukim, the verses that correlate to that, are the psukim that talks about God resting on the seventh day from the story of creation. So we just had that, right? So why is it that we recite those verses immediately after the Amidah? And the simple answer is that we're not only repeating it here, we're going to repeat it again during Kiddush at home. And so the three repetitions of those psukim represent the three circles in our lives we have, or three types of relationship that we have in our lives. The first one is the silent Amidah that represent our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with God. Okay, because in the Amidah, that's what it's our time one-on-one with God. The recitation immediately after the Amidah represent us with the community, or us with the entire world. Okay, and this is why, for example, that recitation is something that you do together with others. The custom is that, for example, let's assume that I'm taking my time and I'm already like the congregation already recited that, or part of that. Let's assume even that the congregation already recited that, and I was still in my Amidah because I'm a little bit slower. Okay, fine. But I want to recite those psukim. I need to recite those psukim anyway. So I'm going to do that later on. The custom is I don't do it on my own. I have to ask somebody else, at least one person, to recite it with me. Again, why? Because that recitation represents my relationship with others, with the community, with the world around me. So I can't do it on my own. Okay? So get understand that there's a correlation between the way we practice and what's the idea behind that. Okay? The third recitation is going to be when? During Kiddush, when I get home. And that represents what? It's my inner circle. It's my family, it's my close friends, those who come into my home. Okay, so these are the three types of circles that we have in our lives. Okay, that's a very nice idea, but to start with, why do we have that recitation all together? Well, this has to do with historic reasons. As we mentioned before, Tefillah took place outside or not in the village or wherever that is. And therefore, we have a couple of practices that the rabbis established. So people are not going to walk home alone at night. It's dangerous. And therefore, they instituted, so for example, we're going to get to that when we come to the weekday tefillah. So for example, just look at page 264. On page 264, immediately after the Mariv Amidah, before the Mariv Amidah, on weekdays, there's a collection of verses here, Baruch Hashem L'olam Amen V'Amen, etc. And the following page, Yiru Yeneinu V'Yismach Libeinu, we're going to come, it's going to be like a very fascinating, I find it at least fascinating, I don't know if other people find it fascinating, debate or whatever, what is the origin of that section of the tefillah? Why do we have it, by the way, outside of Israel? We don't recite that in Israel. It's because it's based on the Babylonian custom, i.e. Chutz La'aretz, diaspora custom, because the practice in the diaspora was that the synagogue was not in the town, and therefore the rabbis established all sorts of stuff to make sure that people are going to walk together home, not alone, because it's dangerous. Okay, back to our material. Same goes here. For historic purposes, this is something that the congregation do in order to make sure that those who are late to shul, believe it or not, they had those back then, or those who take longer time to recite their Amidah, going to finish with that. This is kind of a time filler for the congregation. Either way, it's to make sure that people are going to go home together. Okay, so there are a bunch of examples like that. When it comes to Friday night, this is the example. Then, if you remember, we talked about this bracha me'ein sheva. The bracha me'ein sheva starts like it's the bottom of 346. Starts as what it looks like a repetition of the Amidah. ברוך אתה השם אלוקינו ולאלוהי אבותינו לאברהם ולא יצחק ולא יעקב האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא, right? El Elyon. All that stuff is exactly like the first bracha of the Amidah. So what is going on? You just told me 5 minutes ago, maybe 3 minutes ago, that there is no repetition of the Amidah. All of a sudden, I see there's a repetition of the Amidah. Well, it's not really a repetition of the Amidah. It's a kind of a mini version of it. What's interesting about that is a couple of things. One, the first bracha of the Amidah, so it's El Elyon, and then it goes to Komel Chasadim Tovim, Vekone Hakol, Vezocher Chasdei Avot, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And how does it end? Baruch Ata Hashem, Magen Avraham. Right? That's the way the first bracha ends. What do we have here? El Elyon, Koneh Shamayim Va'aretz. What is this? Koneh Shamayim Va'aretz. What this is coming from? What's the connection? Why are we doing that?
Is the word konen or konen?
Koneh.
Yeah, I know.
Koneh Shamayim Va'aretz.
So it means he bought.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a big question.
Okay, so a couple of thoughts about that. One, the first bracha of the Amidah, according to many authorities, this is the most important bracha. Actually, the halacha is if somebody is unable to focus, to keep their focus throughout the entire Amidah, at least the first one. And the halacha used to be, today the rabbi said we don't have kavanah altogether, so forget it, you don't need to do that. But the halacha was that if you cannot achieve kavanah, focus, intent, in the first bracha, you need to repeat it. Okay, because that's really okay, fine. There's so much we can talk about that bracha. I don't want to go into all that stuff, but there's one thing that is very important. We're talking about our God and the God of our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. This is with this merit, with this excuse, we kind of like feel that we have the right to approach God. Okay, what we call zchut avot, the merit of the fathers. Fine. I know. Liberal Sidurim have also the imahot. Elohei, Sarah, Rivka, Rechava. It's a big debate. I addressed that in my paper. Anyone who wants to spend a lot of time discussing that, we can discuss that. That could be like a whole shiur by itself. The short version, again, I'm giving you my understanding of the different sources and all that kind of stuff, okay? I'm not making halacha here. For practical use, you need to ask the senior rabbi. That's not me, that's Rabbi Top. My personal understanding is that if someone feels that they want to include the matriarchs, the imahot, in the first bracha of the Amidah, there's no problem with that. However, and here is the big however, when it comes to the end of the bracha, Baruch Ata Hashem, the Chatima, what we call the ending. Baruch Ata Hashem, Magen Avraham. Here, I would argue very strongly that we may not add, as they do in liberal Sidurim, the Ezrat Sarah or Ufoked Sarah, depends on the Sidur. You cannot add that. Excellent. Martin asks why. Why? Because that goes into a statement in the Talmud. And the Talmud says, Becha chotmim. It's based on a midrash, conversation, so to say, that took place between God and Abraham. There's a story, famous story in the book of Genesis, that it says that Abraham says to God, Bameh eda ki irashena. How do I know, God, that what you're telling me is true, so to say? There's mountains of interpretation of what exactly are we talking about. By the way, a reference to that question and to that answer we have in our Seder night. When we say Vehi she'amda lavotenu velanu, Vehi, and it is what? It's that promise. That refers to the promise that God gave Abraham. Later on, marked by the Brit Ben Abetarim, the covenant that God has with Abraham, the vision that he has, and then later on, he's commanded to take the bird and check the bird and all that kind of stuff. Right? It's a very famous story in the book of Genesis. We don't have to go into that. So the Talmud takes that story in the Torah and says the following. When Abraham says, Bama eda ki irashena, God, I need a sign from you to know, kind of what's the proof? Like, give me some sign, God, right? And so the Talmud says that God promised Abraham, Becha chotmin. What does it mean, Becha chotmin? It means that the central bracha, of our tefillot, or the most important of That's the Amidah. The first bracha is the most important one. So kind of like the heart of Tefillah, God promised Abraham, yes, we're going to say Elohei Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov. We're going to refer to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But the Chatima, the end is going to be only you. Only Abraham. And because of that, you can't even add Sarah. That's my understanding. Okay. However, in the beginning, you want to add Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, by all means. If it makes you happy, go for it.
I don't understand why that's so important. I mean, I'm a woman, I should.
What?
Like, why is it so important to have all the
Matriarchs? Why? So first, some people it is.
Mother.
You can call it perhaps feminism. You can call it some sort of a form of egalitarianism. You can call it simple connection.
It happens when
For me, it makes no difference.
Yeah, but they're removing themselves, like, it should be.
They're not removing anything. They're not removing anything. It's like, this is during my silent tefillah, in my silent Amidah. I'm not talking about what the Chazan does later on in repetition. That's a different story. But in my silent Amidah, this is your time with God. Say whatever you want.
Exactly. It
That's it.
shouldn't be like, oh, we have to say every name.
Well,
It should be inclusive to.
if you feel that way, then by all means do that.
the first intervene with the Imahot
No.
are in the mid 19th century.
Imahot?
The
The Imahot, you start to see that only in the 80s, even I'm sorry, in the 90s. It's a very recent thing. Yeah.
so the German reform didn't have.
No, of course not.
I'm learning something.
Yeah. This is very,
Modern.
yeah. Okay, that's not our topic. We'll get there. But what is Koneh Shamayim Va'aretz? Koneh Shamayim Va'aretz. So since this is not a real repetition will require the Chatima Baruch Atah Hashem Magen Avraham. We don't have that. So what did the rabbis do? They do something very sophisticated. Koneh Shamayim Va'aretz is a phrase that has a reference. Where is this phrase taken from? Anyone knows? Okay. Is the war, the First World War, the five kings against the 4 kings, that Abraham participates in that war because his nephew Lot is taken in as a captive. So Abraham goes into that war. And what happens at the end of that war? Abraham is victorious, and he, the king of Shalem, Melchizedek, the king of Shalem, which we refer to as Yerushalayim. Okay, that's a midrash. Whatever. Let's go with that for now. He comes to greet Abraham after winning the battle, and he says, "Ubaruch ata le'el elyon koneh shamayim va'aretz." Baruch ata le'el elyon, and you are blessed to God Almighty, who is koneh shamayim va'aretz. How to translate here? The supreme God, creator of heaven and earth? Not exactly. Koneh is acquire, who made the heaven and earth.
It's also
Wow.
maybe like Kinyan.
No, Kinyan is the same thing.
Yeah.
Acquire. Kinyan, koneh, it's the same verb. Why this is important? Why did the rabbi use that? Well, reason number one, that functions exactly like the Chatima of Magen Avraham, without using the same phrase, because that is something, an event that specifically took place with Abraham, but not with Isaac and Jacob. They were not born yet. Okay, so that makes that reference to Abraham specifically, just like saying Magen Avraham, the shield of Abraham. So that's number one. Number two, there's something deeper going on. What we're saying here, what Chazal are trying to say, is a theological, extremely important idea. Okay, to me. The way I see it. Got to be very careful nowadays, especially when things are recorded. What happened in that battle that we're referring to? That battle of Abraham against the kings, with the kings. Because of Abraham's actions, he was able to what we call the Kadesh Shem Shamayim, to sanctify God's name in the world. He was able to cause Melchizedek
To recognize God.
to recognize God. That is much stronger than to say, Baruch Atah Hashem, that blessed are you, God. What do we want at the end? We want to take our text of the tefillah and translate it into action. That's what tefillah is supposed to inspire us, cause us. There's an incredible saying by the Ramban, saying that if you went through the tefillah and you're exactly the same person, nothing changed, and what's the point? You're supposed to be a different person. You're supposed to be changed because of the act of tefillah. So what we want is that our words are going to impact us somehow. So we're going to act in a different way. We're going to be better people. We're going to increase kedusha in the world, whatever you want to call it. It's got to translate into actions. And what is it? That you, through your actions, cause that people recognize God's power, God's mighty, God in general, whatever that means. When we say Kiddush Hashem, that's what we want. Well, that's exactly what Abraham achieved. Think about it. Monotheism did not exist before Abraham. That was his. So it's not that, his action at that time, forget about the military victory, was a huge thing. Through his actions, without, it's walk the walk, not talk the talk. You can talk about religion and God and monotheism and all that kind of stuff. It's going to get you somewhere. But you know what really going to make the impact? The way you act. Actions are stronger than words. Abraham was able to achieve that. When Abraham says, remember, what's the kind of the pre-story that, what exactly happened at the end of the war that led to that reaction? Well, the custom was, if you win the battle, you're entitled to all the booty, you're entitled to everything, all the spoils. You do what Abraham says. God is the one no, God was the one that gave me the strength to do that. I don't want anything. I don't need anything. Just the food that my soldiers, just minimum, bare minimum expenses, the food for my soldiers, for my people. That's it. I don't want anything. It's God. That statement changed the world, whatever the world was at that time. He was one of the kings of the world. Melchizedek, he comes and he says, wow. Ubaruch el elyon koneh shamayim va'aretz. So because of Abraham's actions, Abraham was able to translate it into actions that impact the world. It brings, so he says, koneh shamayim va'aretz, the creator of heaven and earth. So this is why that phrase was chosen, because it's only Abraham, just like Magen Avraham. And it's even a stronger statement than Baruch Ata Hashem Magen Avraham. It's even stronger. And that's why Chazal placed it here. So you need to, whenever there's a phrase from Tanakh, you need to understand what's the reference, what's the story. Chazal that put together Atfilah, they knew their Tanakh. They really knew their Tanakh well. So if they put it there, there's got a reason, and we have to investigate. Yes, Chana.
Why do they say Melchizedek?
What do you mean? That was his name.
Okay, this is what I want to know. Who gave him this name? Because Melchizedek, it's also an understanding of.
So the guy was probably like, already on the path, let's call it, like on the journey to understand God and all that kind of stuff. And he already was operating on the premises of tzedek, justice,
This is what.
and mishpat, right? So justice was already like something. This is something we understand. It's what, justice is something that's applicable not only to Jews.
Right.
So he was already somebody who already understood basic laws of morality and perhaps, and that's probably what was going on. He was already operating by the Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach, right? The 7 Noachite laws, right? Because that's Noach is 10 generations before Abraham. So that was already established in the world to some extent. Melchizedek was already probably following that stuff. One of the mitzvot is to establish a system of justice, courts, and all that kind of stuff. Right?
Because it started with Noach ish tzaddik tamim haya. So
that's
maybe-
different. That's actually different. But
Okay.
the Noachite laws starting after the flood, right? Okay. So he was already like operating that, but to recognize God, I mean, people who are not Jewish also understand thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal. They understand that's
We have so much.
okay, but vast majority of society, most of Americans, even if they're not religious, even if they're not Jewish, are not going and murdering other people just because. Yes, there are some crazy people here and there, but vast majority of mankind, right? These are the principles by, so we understand that. Okay. So this is Koneh Shamayim Va'aretz. Then we have the Magen Avot. Wow, it was supposed to be like, quick review. The Magen Avot, as I mentioned, I don't know how many weeks it was ago, but I mentioned that the Magen Avot is a kind of abbreviated version that refers to all the elements that we have in the Amidah. And we say Magen Avot, that Magen Avraham, that's already connected to that, right? Mechaye metim, right? Ata gibor leolam Hashem, mechaye metim, ata rav leoshia, right? And then Ha'el HaKadosh, that's Ha'el HaKadosh, that's the bracha, the third bracha of Ha'el HaKadosh. Then we have Hameniach lamo beyom Shabbat kodsho, kivam ratza laniach laim, let's do it in English. Who granted rest to his people on his holy Sabbath day. I think that's pretty much self-explanatory. That talks about Shabbat, which is the middle bracha, for he was pleased with them to grant them rest. Okay, we're talking again, the idea of Shabbat is rest, etc. Lefanav na'avod bi'ir'a v'fachad. Before him, we will serve with awe and dread. I don't like this translation, to be honest. What is lefanav na'avod bi'ir'a v'fachad? Before him we serve. Avodah, service, is the parallel to retzeh. Right? Retzeh, when we say during the Amidah, Retzeh Hashem Elokeinu b'amcha Yisrael u'b'tfilatam, right? That bracha of Retzeh we call the service, avodah. So that's that. A reference to that. And then Benodeh Lishmo is reference to the next bracha, modim. נודה לשמו, modim אנחנו לך, right? And of course, at the end we say, Adon ha-shalom. And that's a reference, obviously, to the last bracha of the Amidah, Shalom Rab. Okay, so that little paragraph encapsulates the whole Amidah. Why do we have it there? Why do we have it there? And that goes together with the Chazan continues, right? Flip the page 348 at the top. The Chazan continues with Retzeh b'mnuchateinu, our God and God of our forefathers, may you be pleased with our rest, sanctify us with your commandments, and grant us our share in your Torah. This is the last paragraph of every bracha, of every middle bracha of Kedushat Hayom, sanctification of the day. So we're going to see that paragraph. We had it in the Amidah. We're going to have it in the Amidah of the morning. We're going to have it in the Amidah of Musaf. We're going to have it in the Amidah of Mincha. We're going to have it in the Amidah of the holidays. Okay, so this is the concluding of that. Repeat, it's always there. So the Magen Avot, together with that repetition of the Amidah, why it is all there? Well, a couple of theories. One, if you remember, we said there's no, okay, let's go one step back. We said that there's no repetition of the Amidah in Ma'ariv because there's no specific Korban in Ma'ariv. However, why do we have repetition in Shacharit and Mincha? It's because we had people who didn't know how to daven, or they were illiterate, etc., that kind of stuff, and therefore they fulfilled their obligation by reciting Amen, listening to the Chazan, and reciting Amen. Fine. Since there's no, to start with, there was no obligation. It started as reshut, as optional, as voluntary tefillah, the Amidah. The rabbi said, okay, we don't need to do that repetition. However, because during the week, people don't have time. You know, especially Ma'ariv, you daven at the end of a work day, okay? You're tired, you want to get home, you're hungry, you want to, right? So, right? Okay, what happens on Shabbat? Oh, it's a little bit different. We have a little bit of more time. We're less cranky. You know, we already took a shower, you know, it's like it's Shabbat, okay? We finished early, hopefully, you know. So on Shabbat, the rabbi said, okay, it's not a full repetition, but let's do something to accommodate those who do not know how to daven. So it's a form of repetition. It's not real repetition, but it's a form. It's something that they can. So that's reason number one. Reason number two goes back to what we said. We don't want people to walk alone at night. So what happens? If I'm taking longer time to daven the Amidah, or I'm late to shul, God forbid, that kind of stuff. So in order to make sure that I'm not stuck there alone, walk alone, the rabbi said, okay, I'm going to give the congregation something else to say in the meantime. So everybody's going to walk together. Okay, the Chazan does that with the congregation. So I'm still in my Amidah. Okay, I finished my Amidah. We're together for the Kaddish and we go together. Okay, so these are basically like the different theories why we have that stuff. Now, I mentioned also last time that that stuff that would be called Me'ein Sheva, right? If you remember, the Amidah for Friday night, actually, all the Shabbat tefillot. On weekdays, how many brachot do we have on the Amidah? 19. Right? We have 19 blessings. This is why we call it 18. Right? Makes a lot of sense. But we're going to get there and we're going to talk about it, why it's called 18, and we have technically 19. Okay. By the way, some days we have 20. That's going to be a question. There's going to be a question on your final. What days do we have? We have 20. Okay.
Thursday?
Nope. No. So, but how many blessings do we have in the Amidah on Shabbat and holidays? 7. right? The first three and the last three, which are always, always, always there, never change, nothing, ever, right? But instead of the 13 petitions that we have in the middle during the week, we have one bracha, one blessing, theme of Shabbat. It's called Kedushat Hayom, holiness of the day. So 3 and 3 and 1, usually that's 7. Usually, right? 3, 3, 1. Fine. What do we have there? What we just did, I said it's like the repetition. So Hannah is going to tell you, me'ain is no. What's literally, what does it mean, me'ain? Like. You guys don't know teenagers. Teenagers, like, everything. Every sentence is like 13 like. Right? Like 7. Like the tefillah of 7. Like the Amidah. It's not really the Amidah. It's not, because the repetition is also the Amidah. This is like it. Okay, so this is why it's called Me'ain Sheva. Fine. Now, Me'ain Sheva, the halacha is, we don't do that, we don't recite that in what we call Minyan Sheino Kavua. Okay, let's assume that we're a large family. I'm just making this up. Well, I'm not making this up because my family is large. No, not my immediate family, but my extended family. And, you know, Baruch Hashem, we have a simcha. Let's say we're going into a hotel and we have our own davening. Okay, we take a room, we daven like the whole family. We have a weekend for a wedding or something. Are we saying that Me'ain Sheva part? No, because that's not a constant, regular minyan. That's occasionally. Okay, we have a wedding, got together for the weekend, the family, and we have our own minyan. Okay, there's a federation retreat, whatever. You have a Shabbaton in somewhere. Okay, whatever that is. Okay, and I'm just making those. Okay, you have Friday night davening. Okay, are you reciting that Me'ain Sheva? The answer is no. Why? It's not Minyan Kavua. It's not Minyan Kavua. Are you doing it at Bet Jacob? Absolutely, because that is Minyan Kavua. That minyan is every Friday night since the inception of this synagogue, whatever, 100+ years ago. Every Friday night, there's a minyan.
Yeah, I know.
Why? Why is that the halacha that only in minyan kavua you recite those paragraphs, and when it's an occasional minyan, you're in a cruise, you don't do that. Why? Why?
There is no dedication. Yes, there is.
I'm very committed. I'm going to say every word. I'm dedicated. I'm going to say.
If you don't have the minyan. then-
So I have a minyan. I have 100 people.
Yeah, but they might not participate.
No, they participate. It's a kosher minyan. That's not the problem. They're just like, I'm not going to see them next week. That's all.
So what is the answer?
The answer is very simple. What is the reason why you have like all that stuff? What did I say? The rabbis don't want people to walk alone at night. That means that everybody is in their home. Here, the whole purpose is that I'm establishing this minyan because we're all together. We're not home. We're on a cruise. We're in a Shabbaton, a federation. We're in a hotel. We're whatever that is. We're together. We're not going alone home. We're not walking home alone in the danger. We're here. That's the whole point. So, because of that, I have notes. Okay? Okay. There are other theories. We're going to get there when we discuss Leila Seder. There's another reason. It's because it has to do with Leila Seder. I'm going to keep you in suspense. Okay. Then we said that we have the Kiddush, at least the custom in Chutz La'aretz and diaspora is to say Kiddush after the full Kaddish. Oh, the full Kaddish, Because full Kaddish is always connected to the Amidah. Okay, full Kaddish is always connected to Amidah. How do I know that? Because the line of the Kaddish that makes that connection is in the full Kaddish. It says, Titkabel tzlaton uvaton dechol Beit Yisrael, may the tefillot, may the prayers and the supplications of your people Israel be accepted in Shamayim, in the heavens. That is the line that makes it into a full Kaddish. And so what are those tefillot and supplications? It's the Amidah. That refers to the Amidah. So that means every time I have something between the Amidah and the full Kaddish, you know it means that there's some sort of a connection between that material and the Amidah. Example. So here we understand because it's a quasi, it's a like the Amidah. What do we have like every day in the morning? We have, for example, immediately after the Amidah, in Shacharit, in the morning service, we have Tachanun. Right? Tachanun. What is this Tachanun prayer? Is extension, it's extra supplications that we recite after the Amidah. And it is connected to the Amidah. This is why there's no Kaddish there. Once there's a Kaddish, it cuts off. It creates that separation. Remember, we talked about Kaddish as being the divider between different units of Tefillah. Okay? So this is, okay. After that Kaddish, we have the Kiddush. Don't get confused between Kaddish and Kiddush. Yeah? Kiddush is what we do with the wine. Why do we have that in diaspora? The custom has become to have Kiddush in the shul on Friday night because guests, people were traveling. And where do they end up for Shabbat? Not always they knew somebody. So if you're traveling and you're Jew and whatever, say, okay, I'm going to go to the shul. Take care. Like, this is where, right? You don't need to know people. You just come to the shul and they'll figure this out. Maybe somebody's going to invite me for a Shabbos meal, but if not, you gotta understand, people were extremely poor in the old days, right? It's not that people could afford doing that. So the shuls themselves provided meals for travelers. So the people traveling or whatever, guests, all that kind of stuff, they ate in the shul. It's like the Kiddush we have, right? Okay, so they have like the Kiddush Friday night. Okay, so you make Kiddush because this is where they're gonna be eating their Friday night meal. Okay, now, why we don't have that, generally speaking, we don't have that custom in Eretz Israel. Well, in Israel, the community was much, much smaller. The distances are very small. So even if you went, I don't know, what's the furthest? You were in the Galil, and you come to, how far is the Galil from Yerushalayim? Yeah, it's not far.
In 2 hours, you get there.
Yeah. Today, okay, but so fine. But the point is, you know, Shabbat is coming. It's already Thursday, so I said, okay, fine. Even if you try, you're gonna be somewhere in the community. You're gonna find your way. It's the distances are not that, and therefore, the custom has become that in Israel we don't do that because you know you're gonna end up doing Kiddush at home. In diaspora, in Russia, in Poland, whatever, we're talking about huge distance. In America, huge distances. Well, not in America. America was not discovered yet. Okay. We understand? Okay, fine. Then we have Aleinu. I want to talk just for a second about Aleinu. It's not like Aleinu is something that we're going to discuss more in depth during the weekday tefillot. Interesting, fascinating, the tefillah. Let's talk about it just a couple of minutes. So Aleinu is the concluding tefillah of pretty much every service. Shacharit, Mincha, Arvit. Interestingly, couple of interesting things. What is the source of Aleinu? Where this is coming from? Where do we find that in our liturgy? Is the Musaf for Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so Aleinu is, if you look in the old prayer books, Aleinu was not there.
So it's from Bereshit.
No, it's not from Bereshit, it's from Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, Musaf for Rosh Hashanah. In English, we call it the Grand Aleinu. I love that term. I don't know why. It's the same, the same Aleinu, but whatever, the Grand Aleinu.
But you ask where it's coming
Well, I'm saying in our liturgy, when you look at old versions of Sidurim, you don't see that. Okay, if you look at, we find that in Machzor Vitri. Machzor Vitri is one of the oldest Sidurim / it's a Machzor actually, going all the way to the 13th century, somewhere around that time, maybe even the late 12th century, something attributed to the students of Rashi. And this is one of the oldest texts that we have about tefillah and like how tefillah was, what was in, what was out, okay? Of course, our Siddur have gone through changes since then, but it tells us. So in earlier versions, like for example, in Siddur Rav Amram Gaon, Rav Saadia Gaon, that goes all the way to the 8th century, there's no Aleinu. So we find Aleinu in the Machzor Vitri, but in the Musaf for Rosh Hashanah, and still is part of the Musaf for Rosh Hashanah. That's like kind of a big moment for the Chazan. You can ask him; he'll tell you. Aleinu l'shati. Right? We have that motif also every. Okay, it's a big moment in the Rosh Hashanah davening. Okay. At some point, the rabbis took it from there also and planted it at the end of the service. What is the rationale? What's the theological idea behind Aleinu? What are we doing?
It's probably like a conclusion to remind us of the whole tefillah by the end. It's like like when you write a story. Good. It's kind of, so I want to be a little bit more accurate. It's not the end of the tefillah, but Chazal actually call it that this is the tefillah that accompany us, listen to this, as we leave the shul. What's the nafkamina? What is the practical ramification? If I'm staying in shul, I'm not supposed to say it. Therefore, listen to this. This is pretty shocking. Anyone remembers how do we finish the Musaf on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? I mean, I remember because I'm there. Most people are gone by then. But do you remember what's going on over there? What is the last thing we say? It's the Kaddish. It's the full Kaddish. That's it. There's no Aleinu and all that kind of. We don't say Aleinu just like we say on every Shabbat. At the end, we don't do that. Why? Because the old custom was, you don't go home on Yom Kippur. You stay in the shul the whole day. This break thing is a modern thing. So you go from Shacharit to Musaf to Mincha to Ne'ilah. Only then. And actually, even there, at the end of Ne'ilah, there's no Aleinu. You daven Mariv, and then there's Aleinu. Then you go home. Even today, by the way, remnant for that practice, we can see even today. When you go from Shacharit to Musaf on Shabbat morning, do we have Aleinu? No. We have only Aleinu at the end of Musaf because we go home. So this tefillah is supposed to give us protection as we go outside to the world. Fascinating idea. When we daven Mincha and Mariv every day, our practice and practice of most shulas is you do Mincha at the latest time possible. Like, for example, tonight is going to be 7:55 p.m., just a couple of minutes before sundown. And then the rabbi speaks for a couple of minutes. It becomes halachically night or whatever, quasi-night, whatever. And then we go into Mariv, right? So we do usually Mincha for practical reasons. It's hard enough to get Jews to the shul twice a day. Think about it, like bring them 3 times a day. You know, it's hard. So we do Mincha and Mariv back to back, right? Yes? What happens? We say Aleinu at the end of Mincha. Why? Makes no sense. We're staying in the shul. We're not supposed to. We're not going anywhere. I mean, I understand some people are going to fall asleep because the rabbi speaks as they go. They're traveling in their dreams, but physically in their... Well, so what is going on? Why do we... So that has to do with the old custom. What was the old custom or the old practice, not custom, the old practice of Jews, you know, going back all the way to Babylonia or whatever? They daven mincha when? Not in the at the latest, what we call mincha gdola. Earlier in the day, midday, lunch break. Ish. This is, but a lot of people still do that. If you go to Century City, a lot of office buildings, they have mincha, right? You go to Eula, there's a mincha at like 1:30 p.m. or so. Also by Rabbi Graydon and the Kollel also, like I think it's 2:30, something like that, right? A lot of people do that. When I was in Yerushalayim and I like took care of my oldest, she was a baby, and my wife went whatever. I used to take her for, you know, mincha every day at about 12:30, 1 o'clock. It was good. I was walk with her with a stroller. She would fall asleep. You know, I daven mincha, go back. It was like also like an exercise because it took me like, so, you know, all the ups and downs and whatever. And it's like a good 20 minutes walk. So you can daven earlier. So that's what they did back then. It was their lunch break. They used that to daven mincha. What happens after that mincha? You go back to work. So you do need to say Aleinu because you're done. But now that you are do mincha and mariv together, you're in the shul, you're not leaving, there's no reason to do it. But the custom is the custom. By the way, the old German tradition is very clear about it. You don't say the Aleinu between mincha and mariv because you don't leave the shul. Okay. We're totally off topic. But so Aleinu is the tefillah that accompanies us as we leave the shul. Why do we need that special tefillah? Because it gives us protection. Why do we need protection? Because we were in the shul now. We engaged in tefillah. We're in a protected, spiritual protected environment. Now we're going to go into the outside to the big bad world out there, dealing with not such nice people always, have different values. We have to do business. We have to do whatever that is. We need that protection. Because now we're in protected, we're in the shul, we're in tefillah. We're protected spiritually. We need that protection when we go outside to the real world. Now, why this was the tefillah that was chosen? What is so inspiring about it? So if you look through the text, you'll see there's a couple of things that are happening here. One, it's kind of the animamin. We need to acknowledge, we need to praise God for all that He done to us, but it's what is it? That He didn't make us like the nations of the land. We are grateful because we can serve God. Okay, so that's number one. That's one of the principles of Judaism. Number two, God is the creator of heaven and earth. The only God.
So if you go through the principles, the fundamentals of Judaism, you see them all here. There is no other God. God is the creator of heaven and earth. It's like, it's when you have a test and you have like a little index card where you wrote like kind of the basics, the really nucleus of the material, and you just read it one more time before the test, before the teacher says, okay, close all the books, move away all material, and now the test is going to start. And you read it one last time. The little points, like not the little, but like, the most important principles, this is it. This is that. Okay? I need a reminder of those before I go there. Okay. Now, but do we ever in Judaism leave it in the theoretical? No. The whole purpose, the whole, as we say, gestalt, the whole thing is to take the theoretical and bring it to the practical. So what do we do here? We connected it with the prophecies of Isaiah and Zechariah that talk about the messianic times. What is this messianic times? That everybody acknowledge God's presence or existence, or acknowledge God. Why this is important? I'm going to go now do business with Goyim. I'm going to do business with people who do not acknowledge God. They don't know anything. So I need to remember God is my God. He's the creator of heaven and earth. There's no other God, all that kind of stuff. And I need to convey that message. That's my job. It's letaken olam v'malchut shaddai. When liberal Jews talking about tikkun olam, they're missing one point. It's b'malchut shaddai. It's not tikkun olam by itself. It's tikkun olam b'malchut shaddai, in the kingdom of heaven. Going in and cleaning the beach is wonderful. It's wonderful. It's amazing. But you need to ask yourself one question before you do that. Does it bring sanctification? Does it increases God's name in the world? If the answer is yes, I'm going to be there with you. Okay? That's the whole thing. Tikkun Olam is a beautiful. Today, by the way, there's an incredible book written by Jonathan something called Tikkun Olam. Just Google it. Tikkun Olam, Jonathan, I want to say something with an S. Something I don't remember. Where he really analyzes that concept and what happened to it with liberal movements here in America. Fascinating thing. You should read it. He said that basically they took that term and used it for something totally different. Social justice, whatever you want to call it, whatever. It's not tikkun olam.
Green.
What?
Green.
Green. That's part of it. But actually, I have no problem with the green. The green is part of like tikkun olam of actually.
They forget one thing. They forget God.
That's exactly the point. Tikkun olam can happen. The real tikkun olam can happen only with God. That's the bottom line. Okay, we're digressing. Okay, but so when I'm going to go to this big world out there, I need to what? I need to influence. I need to make sure that God's presence is expanded and present in this world. And this is going to happen through my interactions with them. And this is how I'm doing my job. I'm taking that tefillah, I'm taking everything that I'm saying and translating it into the actions. One last point. According to the Talmud, according to tradition, the first paragraph of the Aleinu was composed by Joshua. There's a huge debate. The scholars don't like it. And there's even a discussion, even in the Talmud, that says that it was Rava, the Amora, the sage of the Talmud that wrote it. However, there is a Masoret. There's whether he did it or it was his inspiration, and it doesn't matter for us.
We're not dealing with facts so much. We're dealing with ideas here. It's Joshua. And the second part, Al Kenekaveh, was composed by Achan. How did the rabbi of the Talmud come to this idea? Look at the first three letters of the second paragraph. Al as Ain, Ken is Kaf, Nekaveh, Nun. Ain, Kaf, right? It's the acronym of Achan. Who was Achan? And who cares? Achan, you need to read chapter, I think 11 or 10 in the book of Joshua. I'm going to do it very quickly. The story of Achan is an example. So Bnei Israel, as you remember, with Joshua, they crossed the Jordan River, they entered the land of Israel. And what they need to do is to start conquering the land. They need to start fighting and conquering the land. The most famous battle was not really a real battle, was the one of Jericho. Right? In a miraculous way, walls of Jericho come down. Great. What happens at that point? Joshua said to everybody, be careful. This is all Kodesh Lashem. You may not take anything from the spoils of Jericho. Okay? Achan didn't listen. Achan didn't listen. He takes from the spoils, just a second. So you'll see in a second. He takes from the spoils. Nobody knows. Fine. Yeah, of course. And this is why we have a problem. So what happens? The next, they're going to another battle on a place called Ai.
And they lost.
And it's a small village, and they lose big time. And Joshua understands that something is wrong. Something is wrong. And they go through a whole process, a lottery thingy, whatever. He asks God, blah, 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 whatever, the whole thing. They found Achan, and he he realizes that Achan took from the spoils, and because of that, we lost in the battle. Make a long story short, Achan is executed.
That's only punishment.
Now, the Talmud fills in the gaps. As Achan is led to his death, he does tshuva. He confesses, he makes tshuva, and during that time, according to tradition, he composed this paragraph. Why this is important? From a theological, whether it's accurate or not, who cares? It's a great story. And for our purposes, that we're exploring ideas here, right? So why this is important? Well, if Aleim is supposed to give me confidence when I go outside to the world, I need to understand that God is with me no matter what. The inspiration to know that somebody, as they are led to their death, can do tshuva, can redeem themselves. By the way, a lot of ideas in Yom Kippur, God willing, we'll get there one day, to Yom Kippur, to confession and all that kind of stuff, are learned from that story in Joshua. That gives, so what? Yes, Judaism always said, listen, it's not all about, we believe in accountability. You're going to be punished. Question is, what is the lesson? Certain things you're going to be punished, you can't get out of. It's too much. However, it's not only that. It's for yourself also. The Talmud talks about like those people that they merit in the world to come because they repented, they did tshuva in the last minute of their lives. Sometimes you can't change the decree. Whether it's from God, whether it's from the court. We say that in the Untane Tokef also. It's one of the principles of Judaism. Utshuva, utfila, utzdaka, ma'avirin et ro'a hagzera. We don't say that it's ma'avirin et hagzera.
Or the degree of the bitterness of the worth of it.
Right. It's taking the edge, the bitterness out of it. You're going to be punished. But the question is, how are you going to take that punishment? Okay, we can't like dismiss and say, you did tshuva, you absolve. Sometimes no. You're going to pay for what you did. But the fact that I can do tshuva, even in the worst, lowest point of my life, as I'm led to death, that's a tremendous inspiration. That gives me confidence, because hopefully none of us, as we leave the shul, is in such bad shape as Achan. And if he was able to do that at that point, how much more so we can do that. And that should inspire us and give us that strength that we need as we go outside to the world and deal with people who have different values than us. Okay? So this is the Aleinu. There's a lot more that we can talk about Aleinu, but that concludes our Friday night tefillah. And God willing, next week, we will continue. We're going to start with the morning, Shabbat morning tefillah.
Shabbat.
Yeah.
It's very inspirational.
Thank you, right?